You've registered your company, you've issued shares to yourself and to your co-founders. Now you want to issue shares to your first employees. Now you're thinking to yourself that this should be easy. But if you've paid attention to your journey so far, or you've watched one of my previous videos, you know that things that should be simple are usually very complicated behind the scenes. So let's explore the mechanics of issuing shares to your first employees. All right. So when you issued shares to yourself, chances are you executed what is called a share purchase agreement, right? And this agreement simply stated that you were getting shares from the company, and in exchange, you were giving the company either $100, $200, depending on the price of the shares on your certificate of incorporation, because this is just a new company, and this amount is typically low. And then also, in a technology assignment agreement, assigned all the intellectual property you've built so far for the startup. So if you haven't done this, by the way, you should go do this, because in the future, a venture capital firm will review all these documents to make sure that the technology of the company actually belongs to the company. And it can get complicated if it doesn't. So hopefully you have executed a share purchase agreement and a technology assignment agreement. All of that is done. Now, you want to issue shares to your first employees. If you're issuing shares to your first employees and you regard them as employees, not co-founders, chances are you don't want them to actually pay for the shares, right? You cannot afford to pay them the amount that they're worth, so you pay them something little, hopefully. By the way, you're required by law to do so. So if you're not doing so, speak to an employment attorney and they will help you minimize any damage. But you also want to give them some shares in addition to whatever compensation you're giving them. And you don't want them to take money out of their pocket to pay for it. So what do? Well, if you went to an attorney, they would first design what is called a compensation plan. Now you're thinking, why don't you just issue the shares the same way you issued our shares? And that's because there's the SEC working behind the scenes. Now, like I said in one of my previous videos, everything has to have an SEC exemption when it comes to shares and convertible notes and SAFEs, anything securities related. There has to be an SEC exemption. So the SEC exemption that applies to employees applies to any employee award that is given under a written plan. So what your attorney likely did, or what they're going to do, is they're going to create an employee compensation plan first. They'll design it. It's typically called a stock plan, or it says something like it has a year behind it, 2024 stock plan, for instance. And then they'll take some shares that you have authorized but have not issued yet. The difference between authorized shares and issued shares can be confusing sometimes. It confused me for a long time as well. But basically what it is when you file your certificate of incorporation, the amount of shares you put there are the shares that you're authorized to issue. Now again, a corporation is a very technical instrument, so everything has to be written and documented somewhere. So your certificate of incorporation says, hey, this corporation is authorized to issue 10 million shares, and that's it. But when you're issuing shares to yourself, right, you only issue to yourself and to your co-founders, let's say 60% of that, which is like 6 million. And that's all the shares of all the ownership in the company at that moment is the 6 million that you've already issued, right? Now you still have that 4 million shares resting, waiting for the dates needed. You're authorized to issue that without going back to the state and telling the state you want to issue more shares, right? So what your attorney is going to do is they'll go to those shares that are authorized but have not been issued to anyone yet. And they'll take 1.5 million or maybe 1 million shares from that and then put it in the compensation plan. From that compensation plan, they can issue stocks to your employees. They can issue stock options to your employees as well. And so what's going to happen is that to issue shares to those specific employees, your attorney will go there, find maybe 300,000 shares they're trying to issue, that you are trying to issue to your first employees. They'll take those 300,000 shares and put it in the contract. Of course, like everything else, it has to go to the board first. So the board approves the stock plan first. After the board approves the stock plan, then the board approves the amount of stock you're issuing to the employee as well. After that is approved, then your attorney will draft a contract, or you can find a template online. I'd advise you use an attorney, but but there are templates online, and they'll put the amount of shares that the board has authorized in there, and they'll send the notice to your employee. The employee is going to review it, and hopefully you've advised them to seek legal advice from their own attorney as well. You should do that. And then once they're done reviewing it and they've accepted the terms, they send that back to you, and then you send it for signature. It's typically signed by the president of the company or the president and CEO and the employee themselves. And once that's signed, that's done. They have the shares as awards and they don't need to actually pay for it. So let me know if you have any questions on this. Leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.